Welcome everyone to the first webinar of this series of the future of open data portals. Thank you very much for joining us today. The first webinar of the series will feature ourselves, the team of the European Data Portal. And the responsibility today is in the hands of Professor Elena Simperl, that is smiling there in the camera. And she's going to give us an overview of the various work that the European Data Portal Consortium has been working on these last 3 years for various dimensions of open data portals and what is the future ahead of them. So just a bit of housekeeping, please, as usual, maintain your microphones mute to avoid disrupting the call. If you have any question, please use the chat. There will be all answered if we have time. If there are many of them, then we will have to do a bit of selection. I will be in charge of that. But just put them on the chat box to everyone, and then at the end we can have a little Q&A before wrapping up. Okay, so slides are already set up. Recording. Elena, you want to say something about the recording?
Yes, so this session is going to be recorded and it'll be made live to you and to those who were unfortunately able to join us as soon as possible.
Great. So that was Elena, our host, and now Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And welcome everyone also from my side to this first webinar. Thank you to those who joined us from all over the world, as far as I can see. We will start this series of webinars with a very brief account of the work I and a number of people from the University of Southampton have been doing in 2018 and 2019 around the theme of the sustainability of open data portals, sustainability being one of the main pillars in our view to secure the future of these really critical resources. Those of you who are perhaps less familiar with the European Data Portal itself, it provides key technology, resources and support to increase the accessibility and the value of open government data in Europe. And those who already know about the portal probably know about the main capabilities it offers in terms of searching for different types of open government data sets that would normally reside in a whole range of regional, local and national portals. To date, the European Data Portal harvests more than 81 catalogues from Europe and beyond, and provides a uniform access to more than 1 million datasets. Beyond this amazing piece of technology, the European Data Portal team is responsible for a whole range of activities to support the entire value chain from publishing to reuse beyond the technology. And I have picked just a very small selection of recent activities. You might have heard about the open data maturity work that the colleagues from Capgemini are doing on a yearly basis that gives policymakers, researchers, open data activists and other stakeholders in the ecosystem an informed data-based overview of how the open government data ecosystem in Europe evolves to inform further decisions around policy and investment. We're also doing R&D around various technical, economical, social, environmental, legal aspects of the open data ecosystem. Here on the slide, our latest analytical report which is looking at how dataset search looks like on the European data portal from a quantitative point of view. We have a comprehensive collection of showcases and use cases of open data, which are a very useful resource in itself to understand this ecosystem and its evolution. And we're organizing events such as this webinar series, or also the series of data talks that we are offering in collaboration with the Support Center for Data Sharing. The work that I'm going to present today is part of this R&D effort in the European Data Portal, and it refers to 2 years of very intensive work, bringing together as many as seven researchers with backgrounds in computing, management, and social sciences, who have looked at this question of what makes open data portals future-proof or sustainable. And we have looked at 4 particular dimensions. So we wanted to get an understanding of sustainability, and we wanted to capture and measure it. So we've spent time trying to understand what indicators and metrics are there to capture the open data ecosystem, and looking at criteria for defining and selecting indicators and metrics in particular context and projects, as well as sources of data and methods to apply to assess indicators and metrics. For some of them, we understood that the tension between the effort required to carry out these measurements systematically and their power to support decisions and inform decisions is perhaps less positive than we would want to. So as a next step, we wanted to understand which of these indicators and metrics and methodologies to assess them could be carried out at scale. In particular, we looked at the limits of automation within current technical and socio-technical architectures of open data portals. We looked at how we could link engagement metrics that are currently supported by various types of data portals and platforms to granular data use metrics. We've also looked at the question of finances and resources. Assuming we have a very good quantified understanding of portal development, evolution, and value creation, what are the main business cases and potential funding models for all of them, and how could these indicators and metrics that we have studied before inform the choice and the design of these models? And finally, looking really into the future, what if portals would look completely different than the way they are conceived and understood today in the European data portal and beyond? In particular, one of the dreams of many of these initiatives is to become increasingly user-centric. What does this mean in terms of current architectures and future architectures? And we've done some work there, both in proposing principles and metrics to be able to assess and understand user centricity, but also more boldly perhaps to think about a redesign, a shift from current software architectures that we're using to build data repositories to those that by design focus more on the community of data publishers and users rather than on the data artifacts. I'm going to start with the first part of the sustainability work we have done. And by the way, the link here on the slide gives you access to no fewer than 7 reports, which summarize the work that we have done over 2 years. I think there's more than 250 pages. I would recommend you starting with the first report, because it offers a a summary of the work and the main lessons learned. So let's just start with what we measure. And the work we've done there, we've started with existing works around the common assessment framework and extensions of the framework that are tailored to open data portals, to just try to understand what sort of dimensions do we need to think about to understand use and impact of open data. So there's various contexts there, including legal, organizational, political, and so on and so forth. Hello. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one here. But then there are various dimensions around the data that is being published, not just technical dimensions, but also the content of the data itself, the quality, and ways to use and reuse it. And then there have been many attempts to try to understand and measure how much that data is used and what impact it has. So this common assessment framework and the various extensions of it have been the starting point for the work we've done in EDP. And what we've done is we then looked at the methodologies that people tend to use to define and assess these sort of indicators and metrics like those suggested in the common assessment framework. And fundamentally, we have found four from macroeconomic studies to studies of populations and user surveys, showcases and use cases, and then various forms of digital traces, for instance, logs of interaction or activity on portals. So with this combination of indicators and metrics and methods to operate on them, we looked at each of the methods to understand if it produces relevant outcomes. And by relevant, we refer to a series of criteria which are listed here, which are considered desirable by various types of stakeholders in the open data ecosystem. For example, the validity of the method, so whether it is closely correlated with the attribute of interest, whether it is reliable, giving consistent results over time and between observations, whether it is efficient in terms of the resources that it takes to carry out the assessment, whether it is sensitive to discriminate between differences in the attributes, transferable, so used in different contexts, perhaps across different countries or across different levels of public administration, as well as comparable. So one of the main results was basically a set of recommendations that were derived from assessing the different methods of assessment for indicators and metrics against these criteria, taking into account attributes of interest related to data, use, and impact, which were the dimensions that you may remember from the Common Assessment Framework. And from that, basically, the main lessons we've learned and the opportunities that we have identified are as follows. We noted that open data ecosystems need to do more to survey their members for open data use and impact. So some activities are available and the European Data Portal is carrying out their own exercise, but we need much more insight into what happens at various levels in public administration. Publishers should aim to engage with data users that are identified not just in classical surveys, but also in the huge range of showcases and use cases that are meanwhile available. We've identified this collection of showcases and use cases collected not just by the EDP, but also by other major players in this space as a resource in itself, to carry out different types of qualitative and quantitative analysis. And finally, publishers and portal managers should share the list of metrics they have identified to encourage larger catalogs of metrics and comparability. Moving on to the next piece of work we've done around the sustainability of Open Data Portal. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work we've done around making portals more user-centric, and then as a further step, our different methodologies we have proposed to automate some of the indicators and metrics assessment for use and impact. If we start with the first one, so in 2017, Joanna Walker and I published an analytical report in the first edition of the European Data Portal, where we have identified 10 dimensions for what we call the future of open data portals. And these are be discoverable, be measurable, promote use, and so on and so forth. In EDP2, we then went ahead and started thinking how we could operationalize these dimensions to allow portal owners, but also researchers, to systematically study and compare them to identify areas where perhaps there is low diversity in the results, which may indicate various types of barriers or areas of research that need to be studied further. Say, starting from these 10 dimensions, we have carried out an extensive literature review, going through a number of disciplines, from user-centric design to social sciences and economics, to develop a series of 5-star schemes to assess the 10 dimensions in a portal. So those of you familiar with the technology called linked data, which is used by some open government data portals to publish their data sets, this is a very similar type of scheme that starts with more basic technologies like putting data on the web, and then it goes further to machine readable data in non-proprietary formats, linked, and so on and so forth. Just to remind ourselves what the dimensions are. Basically, we start from rethinking how portals are designed in terms of the user journeys that they support. So less focus on supporting publishers and more specific built-in support for usage and user journeys, learning from the techniques utilized in commercial data marketplaces and e-commerce to build communities, investing in discoverability. And by discoverability, I mean not just a technical kind that is enabled by harvesters and crawlers, but also borrowing from e-commerce practices for people to be able to know what data they could possibly find and not find in a repository, publishing good quality metadata, using existing standards for interoperability, linking datasets to enhance value, but then also collocating tools and documentation and offering different options for both big data and more manual processing to support reuse both in commercial settings, for instance via APIs, but also to allow for individuals perhaps to download sample data sets that they can process on their own machines. And overall, this dimension of being measurable as a principle to allow portals, but also portal users to have a very good understanding, to be very transparent and accountable about the degree to which they are meeting users' needs. I'm going to give just a few examples of the sort of 5-star schemes we have developed. So for instance, for Organize for Use, we went through the literature around user centricity in general and in open data specifically. And then we've basically built this scheme from 1 to 5 stars, which we're using to assess portals against this dimension. The same promote for use, or for instance, collocate documentation. Then we went and selected 10 portals, which are at different phases in their open data maturity journey, with the aim to get a sense of how diverse the space is, rather than proposing a ranking, say which portal performs best, for instance, according to promote for use or organize for use. So we went and applied for each of the 10 dimensions, those schemes, by studying the online portals themselves and reading the associate documentation. And we've derived a series of recommendations, some of them more general around how portals should consider assessing these dimensions regularly as part of their strategic assessment of what they would like to achieve regarding user centricity. But we've also identified areas where, no matter how advanced the portals were according to their Open Data Maturity Index of the country portal itself, they were still scoring really low. For instance, according to the dimension collocate documentation, none of them was really implementing that dimension to a large extent. So the question then for further research and further studies is to try to understand what are the reasons, technical or otherwise, for this limitation. We then also looked at automation as a way to support portals to carry out these sort of assessments routinely. And for that, we've carried out an additional piece of work, which was not part of the European Data Portal, where we have taken those 10 5-star schemes, which I've just touched upon, and then looked at how they are actually realized in terms of metrics on CCAN-based portals. So we've used CCAN as one type of software that is widely used in open government data. We've picked a subset of CCAN-based portals indexed by the EDP, and then we looked at how each of these 10 dimensions could be assessed automatically using CCAN functionality in the design of these portals. And among other things, the analysis showed that current technical realizations of portals don't actually lend themselves well to a continuous detailed monitoring of data use, and we've made some suggestions how this could be improved. But then to perhaps provide more useful advice beyond you have to change the design and the architecture of your portal, we've also carried out an analysis which, instead of going and saying this is what we think should happen and this is how you should operationalize that, we looked at what sort of metrics could portal designers and architects define, perhaps using the sort of standard activity and engagement metrics that you could expect in a website that is aiming at building and fostering community interactions. So starting bottom up to develop data use indicators based on the real interactions with the data sets which are logged via Google Analytics, for instance. And then from that, we proposed a methodology to link these sort of activity metrics to data characteristics, like the number of rows or number of columns in the data set, the domain, the availability of documentation, the number of people contributing to the data set or reading the documentation, many other attributes like that. So the aim there was to say, well, if you do have a portal with community features where you can measure some sort of user activity and community engagement, here's a way you could try to see which of these engagement parameters are linked or correlated with specific attributes of the data. And that will give you a sense of how you should present your data sets. So rather than just publish them, how you should present them to the users to lead to foster community engagement and community activity. And we've tested this tellingly, not on CCAN or any of the repository softwares that you might expect, but on GitHub, which offers lots of user-centric capabilities because it is by design set up to facilitate sharing and collaboration around data and code rather than mere publication. And this is informed prototype software engineering piece we have done towards the end of the 2 years, where we've looked at alternative futures. So from data-centric architectures to more user-centric ones. And what we have done is we have carried out, we have built an open source architecture for an alternative data portal architecture, which focuses on publication, but actually conceptually organizes that space around data sets and collocated tools and documentations, which are then maintained by communities. The software is already available on GitHub, and in the report you can find a series of user journeys that give you a sense of the capabilities. So this helped us understand the technical feasibility of this sort of alternative architectures and get a sense of what would be the current barriers, both technical as well as organizational, when it comes to supporting different types of data sets. For instance, big data sets like the ones in geospatial domain on the EDP, but also access to streaming data via APIs. To conclude, we have carried out extensive interdisciplinary work to describe, characterize, and explore this concept of sustainability of open data portal, understood through two lenses, that of use and impact. And so we've studied and proposed frameworks of indicators and metrics to capture attributes of interest around the data, its use and its impact. We have provided recommendations on how to define and select these sort of indicators, and how to perhaps think about portal architectures in a more user-centric way, which would enable and open opportunities for defining new types of measurements and assessments, which could be to some degree automated. And towards the end of the work, we have also looked at how the software, the technology that would enable these sort of assessments would look like, and we had some very promising results. So this was me. I'm happy to take some questions now for the remaining time. I will leave this slide here because it gives a summary of the work that we have done. And thank you very much for being here and for having me.
Thank you, Elena, for the talk. And now I did not see any questions on the chat. Maybe if you have a question, you could write it there. Don't forget to put to everyone in the little menu on the chat if you have a question.
Should I continue to share my screen, or do you think I could?
Probably yes, because if someone asks something that relates to a slide, then
okay, yeah, no problem.
So we have a question from Gianfranco. What's next? What space you could not research yet that it's more compelling to you?
So I think, and this is obviously a bias because I do have a computational background. I think I would like to understand more how portals are used, and to be able to think about user centricity, not just from a indicators, metrics, and assessment point of view, but really from a design point of view. So in EDP, we have to some degree borrowed concepts from platforms like GitHub that are very successful when it comes to sharing and collaboration in the digital space. We have also looked at platforms like Kaggle. I think we'll have a speaker from Kaggle later in this webinar series. But what I am really missing is a really good understanding of the user needs. And I would like to be able to learn about those, not just from studying interactions and different digital traces of current systems, but almost starting from a clean slate, and seeing how that would change the way we understand and design portals today.
Yes, great. Thank you, Elena. So we have a question from Brigitte. Where do we find the slides? I think they will be published tomorrow together with the video. There will be a link in the EDP page of the seminar, and we will also make them available on the site together with the recording. So next question, Bob Corred asked, data portals give access to data, downloads and APIs. This also means a difference in the means of measuring use. Are data communities geared to downloads, APIs, or both?
So this is a very good question. So the methodology we have proposed to link the sort of engagement metrics like downloads and API calls to data characteristics is agnostic to these. So it basically tells you, all right, say, what is it that you are capturing or could capture in terms of engagement metrics? If you have downloads, if you're tracking downloads, fine. If you're tracking API calls, even better. If you're tracking visits, so from this list of engagement metrics, select those that you have and are most relevant to you. Then look at how you are publishing the data, not just in terms of content and data attributes like quality and size, but also in terms of, do you have previews, do you have documentation, so user-centric attributes as well. And then look at these two sets of variables and see how your data performs, what sort of profiles of data you find in your portal that would help you understand which ones are more used, more popular, and why. And then basically adapt the way you design your portal to encourage people to use some of the less popular data sets more. In the report, I didn't present this today, but in the report we've also shown that you can actually predict some of the engagement metrics from based on features of the data and features of the community. So the answer is you could do both. It depends very much on how your data community looks like, whether it is more of a developer-oriented community that appreciates API access, or whether we're talking about perhaps a volunteer-based grassroots initiative where individual citizens upload data that they collected themselves.
Okay, great. Next question from Axel. It's a bit long, so maybe Axel, you would like to unmute yourself and ask it yourself, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elena, for the nice talk. Yeah, I was just asking in respect to our own monitoring efforts of quality of data and so on, which was more on this technical observable type side. We just see that data portals develop quite differently up to disappearing, and thinking about if you're focused here maybe more on the EU portals, do you think that this is more stable, consistent development here than compared internationally. So I would be interested in Europe against the rest question, but particularly since all open data efforts, particularly open government data efforts, also depend a lot on political commitment. So where do you see this go? So that would be interesting.
Yeah, so I think I don't have a good answer. It is an excellent question, and to some degree we've made our life easy in the work we've done in the EDP by focusing on the 80 or so portals that EDP catalogs. That sample is already quite diverse. So there's portals that are already quite advanced and have went through 3 redesign, reorganization stages, and some that are much early in their journey. But we obviously, this is not representative for the whole range of portals, including those that perhaps cease to exist or are less maintained than they should be. So I think, nevertheless, even if you consider this evolution and these different stages of a portal, I think this sort of an approach to sustainability that we are proposing can help document this journey in an empirical way, and hopefully also provide some quantitative insights to inform some of the budgeting and planning decisions that undoubtedly are quite critical to ensure that portals continue to receive the resources that they deserve.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions on the chat. Maybe I will have one question. After all the studies you have done and looking at all portals in all Europe, what would be the thing that you will tell them, okay, this is the one thing that you need to start fixing tomorrow? Like the more important thing that they need to fix like now to become more usable and guarantee their survival?
I think they need to capture more data about what is going on. And they need to, so in our analysis, in various parts of this work, we have analyzed portals and tried to see what are they capturing, what could they capture using based on the architecture that they have and the software that is supporting them. And too often we have realized that the implementation of the portal just doesn't make it very easy to define different types of indicators and metrics and capture them. So I think a standardized core set of metrics and analytics capabilities would be the first thing that I would recommend them. And then secondly, a way to operationalize the analysis of the data they collect, and that would feed then into technical and budgeting decisions.
Great, thank you. Gianfranco raised his hand. He wants to add something. Please go
ahead. Yes, it's interesting that Elena named this as the very first topic to tackle, because we, for the ones of you who don't know me, I'm part of the project as well, and I've been recently participating to a meeting with the member states talking about how we measure the success, for example, of European data programs. And one of the objections we got from some of the member states is they are concerned that web analytics and in general monitoring user behavior on data portals may actually be violating their privacy. So Elena, there's some work we need to do to help our colleagues in the national governments to realize that what you just described does not need to be intrusive or violating anybody's privacy. And to a point, it is actually a way to ensure that there is a return on investment of the member states in the way they invest taxpayer money into offering these resources to their people. What do you think?
I absolutely agree, and obviously I haven't touched on privacy at all, and none of the analysis that we have done include personal information. But I do appreciate the concern when it comes to tracking, and when you bring in best practices from e-commerce, for example, that there is a legit concern there, and obviously you need to strike the right balance between the level of personalization that is needed, which we haven't actually touched upon at all, and the sort of ability of understand when useful ability of a product owner, of a portal owner, to understand how that product is used.
Great, thank you very much to both. And I think we don't have any more questions. So that means that we can conclude the session of today and warmly invite you to our next webinar 2 weeks from now, the 20th of October. We will have Juan Sequeda from data.world, US company, talking about how to move from an open to an enterprise data catalog and their experience as a company supporting both open data portals and enterprise data portals for large companies. So thank you very much again, and I hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Luis. Thanks, Elena.
Thank you. Bye.